Joining me in our backstage area is Sarah Sloyan, who is the Vice President of EntreLeadership. So first up, Sarah, welcome.
Thanks, Ken.
How's it going from your point of view out there? I guess you were out there in the audience first session?
Yes, it's really fun. And I love this topic, market disruption. Yeah. It's a really fun topic to get to talk about. The stories are awesome, and it really revs me up to go out there and think differently.
All right, so I would love, before we get to some of our viewer questions, what was the decision-making process like when the team said, all right, let's make market disruption the theme of this particular one-day event?
Yeah, we actually started with this topic at our summit event. We taught one lesson. We realized this is a real hot topic in the marketplace that we're not talking about as much as we need to be, is how do we constantly stay innovative and on our toes? And we started studying some of these companies that really got complacent, and it ultimately led to their demisal, which is really scary. But yeah, it's been a fun topic to talk about. So then we said, let's make a whole event about this. So that's what we're doing today.
All right. So we're going to take some of your questions. First one comes from Mike. He says, what's the best way to handle the transition with the team from a leader moving on to another role and someone from that team taking over the leadership role?
Yeah, this is a great topic and a great question, because you have to always be replacing yourself. And so the way you do that and doing that well is going to be really key to your business continuing to thrive. So I would say I really like to plan in advance and start giving that person what we call 20-pound weights. So how do you start introducing them to some stuff before they are at this very visible place where it's, if they make a mistake, they're going to be lit on fire? How do we start doing that at a non-fatal level? So are there small decisions you can start filtering over to them? Can you bring them in to observe meetings or discussions? Can you talk them through after the meeting why you talked about something a certain way or why you made the decision? I also think it's key to spend some time talking about the underlying principles that you use to make decisions, because you'll never be able to talk someone through all the different scenarios that they're ever going to encounter. And so, but if you can take a minute and say, here are kind of those key underlying principles that I use to make decisions, then they can apply those to any scenario that they encounter.
All right, good. Next question is from Charlie. He says, how do you help morale when vacancies are being filled by other individuals and not current staff? Ooh, that's interesting.
That's tough.
Yes.
That's tough. I think it starts by being clear with people on the growth track and what their performance is currently and what it's going to take to get to those next level roles. And that way it's never a surprise if someone's, let's say they think their next step is director of marketing. Well, then they're not surprised when they aren't being considered for that role, because they understand, here are the hard and soft skills that are important for me to have. This is what it's going to take. Right now I have to be a 3 out of 5 on these things, but if I want to be director of marketing, I need to be a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5 on some of these things. And you're having that conversation, so then it's never a surprise.
All right, let me do a follow-up question to that as I'm sitting there thinking about that. How should a leader, what should they feel like they're not doing what they need to be doing if you're only filling vacancies from outside? Because I know at Ramsey Solutions, we're very intentional. We have people that come from outside, and then we have people that we move up the ladder, and we're very intentional and, quite frankly, good at it. You're an example of that. So what should be that mix?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I really prefer to promote from within if I can. Now, that doesn't mean you do that at the expense of promoting someone who's not ready or who is just frankly not a good fit for that role. And so I think there is something broken if you aren't finding opportunities to promote people within that they're not ready. Then you probably are not doing a good job of exposing them to some of those smaller 20-pound weights that we just talked about. And you need to reevaluate, okay, what's my process to do that? Because the reality is those people that are internal, they have all this amazing company context on culture, right? Your company probably has a very unique culture, a way of doing things. So then what that tells me is then you haven't been working on maybe some of the hard skills that it would take to complement that. So yes, I think it's still okay to bring people in from the outside, but if you're only bringing in people from the outside, that is a sign to me that you haven't done a great job of cultivating the people who could be the next layer of leadership before then that position comes open.
All right, next question comes from Dax. He says, I have a junior employee who is not rising up to her potential. Should I move in another direction, or is there anything I can do to get her back on the bus and find the proper seat?
Yeah, I think this goes back to what we were just talking about. So, if you have been very clear and you have this on paper, we call it a scorecard of kind of hard and soft skills that we expect from that person in that role. If you have been clear and that person is still choosing not to grow in that capacity, that's a whole, you can lead a horse to water, right? But you can't force them to embrace that growth and make that happen. So that's a whole different conversation. But if you haven't been clear as the leader, I think that's the first step to me, is be very clear. And to be clear, I would put it on paper. And you're looking at that and you're going, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5 in communication, where do you see yourself? And then, okay, well, where do I see you? And it brings up this great conversation, because some people just may not be aware of that being a requirement to get to that next level. So to me, it starts with being clear. If you've already been clear and they still choose not to, or they can't or haven't grown in that way, then I think that it's time for that person to either, we say, okay, you're great in the role you're in, and you're going to stay in that role, or maybe they're not even hacking it in that role, and we need to talk about, are there other seats on the bus that are a better fit, or is this an attitude problem?
Right. And so let's stay there. So you've been clear as the leader, and they're not measuring up. So now it's the responsibility of the leader to say, okay, here's why you're not measuring up, and either that's fixable or it isn't.
Right.
So if it's an attitude thing, you're gone after a certain amount of time. But if it's a seat issue, I know you do this. What does that look like to help them realize, okay, we've given this some time. We've been very clear. You're not being able to perform, but we like you. You're a culture fit. You're an attitude fit. It's a competence issue in this role. How do you navigate those next steps to try to find, and then not just find another seat, but hopefully they go, all right, I accept this.
Right. My favorite scenarios, and it doesn't always work out like this, is when we have mutual recognition of the fact that this is not a good fit any longer. So maybe the role has outgrown that person. Maybe they were never a great fit for that role, and it was a mistake from the beginning. Hopefully that's not the case. But when you sit down and you really look at that scorecard for what it is going to take in that role, in your current role or whatnot, if you can mutually come to that conclusion by looking at that, what I usually do is go, okay, we've now looked at this scorecard 4 weeks in a row. And it feels like we've said minimally acceptable on these skills is a 4 out of 5. And you are continuing we agree that you're continuing to operate at a 3 out of 5. I got to be honest, if we do this for a couple of more weeks, the next step is going to not be comfortable conversations. But what I feel like here is that this is more of, this is not a great fit in the role, because you've got an amazing attitude. You're a really hard worker. What are your thoughts on that? And kind of open up the dialogue. I don't think you have to have it buttoned up or this perfect conversation. Mm-hmm. I think you can just talk about it. And then what I try to get them to realize is the seat is not a great fit. What if we talked about other opportunities in the company? If you want to, we can double down on this role. But the reality is, if we spend 6 to 8 weeks and you're still at a 3 out of 5, unfortunately, we're going to start talking about you no longer being a fit on this team. Mm-hmm. And what I'd love to do is if we say right now, this is not a great fit, let's look at these other opportunities. It gives us an opportunity to turn the corner and not you have to completely leave the team.
Good stuff there from Sarah Sloyan. Sarah, thank you for hanging out with us.
Yeah.